the presentation I'm calling the Malawi calling. And that's a calling on my heart, but also the fact that Malawi is calling us. The people of Malawi are calling us. I just found a text from Reverend Stanley yesterday that said, "The things you're doing right now are too important. I will not bother you with the tales of the torturous situations that we're seeing." And they are very desperate right now. My question that I had during my whole trip, and basically it's been during my life, has not been, God, who are you? Which we study a lot about that, and we study a lot about Jesus. And you know, most of us have had a chance to begin to know who God is. But the question that came to me over and over again, God, do you know who I am? There are so many things sometimes that God asks us to do, or we look at projects, or we look at things where the way we want the world to be, like the anthem that was this morning. We say, God, do you know who I am? Why are you telling me about this? What can I possibly do? This is the Malawi calling. I was a wife of a pastor, full-time Presbyterian pastor. We had 4 daughters and had a wonderful life together with many different things. But I had the option to be who I was. A very shy, introverted person who did the duties of a pastor's life. I could be in the kitchen, I could do planning, but because of my children who took up so much of my time, I didn't need to do a lot of else. When he passed away, the rest of my family was going to a small rural church, and they needed someone to fill the pulpit. Well, they said, Karen, why don't you come and start doing that? And I did. It was kind of something I gradually moved into. But they said it was just because I had such a good background with my husband, and I went through seminary with him, basically, so I knew a thing or two. I started that, but when he passed away, they kept saying, now Karen, it's time for you to step up to the plate. Because I had said, no, I'm not taking the classes. No, I'm not going to be a commissioned pastor or CRE, what they called it back then. No, I can't do that. For one thing, as you can see, I'm computer illiterate. I always have plenty of excuses that I hold on that can keep me from stepping out. And it's great. But when he passed away and my kids had all moved out, I knew it was time. I knew God had said, this is time. So I said, okay, I got my bases covered. My son-in-law lives with me, and he can help me with the computer stuff. I'll take the classes. And miracle of all miracles, there were 5 things, which I won't take the time to run over, that happened that said, don't go to that first class. One of them was, I hurt my knee and I was on crutches. But I went, and then with all the struggles of the various computer people there, they couldn't get my computer to boot up. And so I just closed it and said, praise God, I don't have to take the classes. You know, it's just one of those things. I got a sign from heaven, and I just sang on my way home. It was great. And then Presbyterian decided, no, I was really called to my church. And I felt that calling, because if you're going to be a body of Christ, you can't have to wait on some visitor to come in and give you the communion or baptize your children or hold a meeting. A community of Christ is vibrant. And I knew that. So I tried to talk to some of my people to take the classes since I couldn't. But Presbyterian said, no, we're going to commission you anyway. So there I am. I came in the back door, and I confess that's all God's doing. If you all aren't happy with it, fine. That's great. That's where Malawi calling starts, though, because while I was on the session, one of our pastors in the Ohio Valley Presbyterian said, I'm having this guy come from Malawi. He's a prison chaplain, and we thought maybe you could host him for a visit. Well, I'm sorry, but I haven't had good experience with Presbyterian things over my lifetime in the Presbyterian church. Some of them just didn't reach the level of truth and spirituality and life that I was looking for. And so my initial thing was, we don't want to hear from another one of those who's going to come and give us a travelogue. I'm not going to give you a travelogue, and he didn't either. I asked him to preach for Sunday, and he didn't say one thing about Malawi. It was almost disgusting because I was looking for it. He talked about Jesus. He talked about Jesus, and he started off with the scripture in the Old Testament from Exodus. I remember that so well. And as I came to know this man, I knew that he was the real deal. And later on, I found that this man, Reverend Stanley Chanesia, actually was one of 8 children from a very poor family. He had no shoes. His father left the family with no food, nothing, and he ended up, and we think of poor here in the States. Even for the poorest of the poor here in the States, there are resources. But there were no resources, no place to turn. In order for him to get to school, he went to the city to earn money for jobs to pay the school fees, and he slept in latrines. This man knows the depths of poverty, and now Malawi is the 3rd or 4th most impoverished country in the world. Let's see what else I can say here. This is the man. He was actually, because of his ministry, he was actually called to come to talk before the UN. That's where he's sitting. Because they wanted to know, how can they help in the most impoverished nations in the prison ministry? There he's speaking under a tree to a number of the inmates at one of the prisons. You hear him laugh. He has the joy of the Lord in the most desperate of situations. But these are all school children going to school, and if you look closely, they either have, most of them, flip-flops on or they're barefoot. They just are lucky to be going where they're going. That's our little church, Concord Presbyterian Church, and our little group of supporters for Reverend Stanley's ministry. We all got on board when he began to talk to us. This is Malawi. Malawi is in Africa, below the equator, as most of Africa is. It's down in the southern part, and it's in, I don't know how, Mozambique is between the coast and Malawi. A third of Malawi almost is a lake, a grand, beautiful lake. Reverend Stanley serves 8 prisons, which are listed here. That talks about the poverty. I want to tell you that the people there are some of the hardest working people I've ever met. Now, I know that people who have roots from the rural areas, and you knew your great-great-grandma or whatever, you have tales about how hard those people worked. When I stepped off the plane into Malawi, it was like stepping into the early 1800s. You don't have a lot of electricity. It comes on now and then, very sporadically. And they don't have fuel, even. Now, we have a lot of fuel issues here. Right now, all their gas stations are closed, the ones in the city, and it's very hard to get gasoline. But more than that, what these people are doing here in the first slide, the man is taking a day to walk up the Zomba Mountain. And there he's going to glean wood. He's going to find illegal trees to chop down, low-hanging branches, and nothing is left on the ground. And then they walk back down this mountain. It's a long mountain, it's a long stretch. carrying their wood. And sometimes it's on a bicycle. Their bicycles are the Malawian pickup truck, okay? They take everything on a bicycle. So here they have made charcoal out of the wood. After that long trek to go glean just the barest of the wood, they take it home, they dig a pit, they line it with stones, they put that wood in, catch it on fire, cover it up, and burn it without oxygen time. It turns into charcoal, so they uncover it. They have to take it out, let it cool, stack it into their feed bags, and off they go to market or to the roadside in their bundles of charcoal. Now, I was with Reverend Stanley when we stopped and bought one of those bundles. It took 3 people to carry that bundle and put it in his car. And I asked him, how long will that last for cooking? He said about 2.5 weeks. So that's their fuel, and that's why they don't have school in the winter. In our winter, we have school. In our summer, because of the rural standards of kids helping on the farm, they don't have school. But in Malawi, because they don't have fuel for heat, they don't have school in their coolest of times. Next, showing the resourcefulness of people, here's a man who was an inmate, and he has set up a little tailoring shop. This was right down the road from where I was staying. And you can see the dimensions of that shop are not very much. We complain about our work situations. Oh my goodness, that's a treadle sewing machine he does all his work on. I went in, he measured me, he had me pick out the pattern, the style of dress, and he sewed it right there. It was amazing, the resourcefulness of what people will do to be able to put a little bit of food on their plates and for their families. Just want you to appreciate a little bit who these people are. There's buying the charcoal. There's somebody selling sugar cane that he grew right by the side of the road with a bicycle to carry it. This is home. This is where I stayed, actually, Reverend Stanley's house. They do all their cooking outside in the front on little heaters, stoked up with charcoal or wood. And most of what they eat is corn-based. Encimo is what they call it. And it's just a corn porridge, and it doesn't have a lot of nutrients. But there they are. Actually, this meal on the right-hand side is at a funeral. And the brown beans is what they call relish. It's any kind of beans or anything you can add to that tasteless encima to make it palatable. And then you have your typical servingware, which are blue plastic buckets. This is the front porch of the place where I stayed. And this lady is the daughter of the man, Reverend Stanley Chinesia. She's cooking what they call domas. See all those little white things there beside her that look like eggs? Those are little rolls of raised dough, and she's getting ready to fry them in that pan. The reason I like this picture is it shows plastic bags hanging. What do we do with plastic bags? Plastic bags over there are precious, and they take care of them, and they use them and use them and use them. This lady here is a teacher, where I happened to meet her just as she was coming home from teaching. She has 200 grade school kids in her class. She was exhausted and worried because they're trying to have her teach a new math program. We hear about new math, they get new math. And Reverend Stanley came up to her and said, it's time to give us tea. So we went in and she hosted us even though there was no electricity. She had to get the fire going, and she had very little except she did bring us some bread and some peanut butter. What a friend she was. She rescued me at that point. I was having trouble with my appetite because there were so many emotions running, and there was so much Well, I was exhausted because there's a rooster underneath my window that woke me at 2 every morning. But I couldn't eat very much, which, as you can see, that didn't bother me a lot. But they were very worried, and he had said, when we sat down, he said, "You must eat everything that you take on your plate." Well, I just took half a piece of bread and some peanut butter to be polite. And I tried, but it was difficult. The peanut butter was really dry. Anyway, Finus is her name. And he started on that, "You've got to eat, you've got to eat." And she looked over at him, grabbed my plate, and said, "She is full," and walked out. I said, yes! The women do have some standing in Malawi, but it's funny, it is like the early 1800s. Men and women are separate a lot. Okay, let's see. This is a place where I preach. Wonderful song here. I have to tell you what that song is about. That song is about people, women who gossip and tell stories on one another, and in heaven, they're going to get theirs. And it was so great because when they sang that during church, I realized, like this morning's sermon, we don't want to talk about punishment in the afterlife. But for them, just like for the Hebrew people in Israel, it was grace of God that we have a better life where evil is going to be not acceptable. Okay? This church was amazing. There were probably 400 people there. It has everything that they do is beautiful, but in a very plain, simple way. They don't have time to put beautiful finishes on things. All rough-hewn and metal open, just gorgeous. This church service started at 7 in the morning. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it was over. They had 4 choirs, and each choir sang 4 numbers. Now you think that's pretty good service, and you can understand they have to walk for miles. There are no cars in the parking lot. They're walking through the bush to get to their church at 8 in the morning. This was after church. Reverend Sam says, "I'm going to get videos. All the choirs come and sing all your numbers so I can take videos." That's why there's nobody behind there. That's after church. And they all stayed and sang all their songs again. And then after that, he invited all the teenagers, which there were about 60, sat down, and he encouraged them. He spoke to them for almost a half an hour. More. They are so hungry and so delighted to be in fellowship and have the Spirit of Christ with them. And this place here is a funeral. They're preparing for the funeral. They are making wreaths for the funeral from the various grasses and leaves that they have picked to bring. Beautiful country. It looked like Lowe's Garden Center over there, except everything was just bigger and better. And then we had the elephants. That was like, I did get to go on a safari type of thing. That was like Discovery or National Geographic. Except, don't believe everything they say. When the big bull elephants come at you with their ears big and wide, They tell you on Discovery, you gotta run. Well, they came after us, and his ears aren't too wide right there, but he came straight on with his ears like this. And the guy said, that's all right, he's just showing us how big he is. Beautiful country. Reverend Stanley said, we have mountains like you do. Yes, they do. The land was originally a plateau, and then geologically, the plateau had a rift in it, and all of the magma came up through the rift, okay? That's the makings of these mountains, and then over time, everything got eroded away and left these gorgeous mountains. It was something to behold. And they run the length of the country. This is Lake Malawi on the left. I had a wonderful trip to see Lake Malawi. And on this other side is the greenest green I ever saw, and that's tea country, the third largest producer of tea. Before I go to my time in the prisons, I want to talk about my trip to Lake Malawi for just a minute. When I was called to Malawi, it was because our Presbyterian has a partnership with a lot of the churches there. And they were planning a trip. COVID knocked out a couple of trips, but they were finally going to get to go. And everybody said, Karen, you have so much with Reverend Stanley. You're going, aren't you? No, I can't go. I had a lot of good excuses for not going. I'm almost 73 now. I was 72 then. I had a lot of heart problems. Very difficult to walk sometimes. I had determined not to take COVID shots for various reasons, part of it because of my heart problems. There were just a lot of different things that said don't go, including my best friend who said don't go. And my family who said don't go. And I thought, this is good. No, I'm not going. I'm a homebody anyway. I hate to fly. So what happened was every time somebody said, Karen, you're going to Malawi, aren't you? I would start to cry. And, that's okay. I'm an emotional person. But on January 2nd, I went to bed and after prayer, and then I woke up in the middle of the night having had a dream. And the dream was more like just a vision, it wasn't a story. I was standing in the middle of the Malawi airport. And I woke up and I said, Lord, what is this? And I didn't get an answer. I was just amazed. And then I thought, well, I better think about this. So, as time went on, each one of my excuses got knocked down. I took the heart tests and the doctor said, yeah, there's a lot going on, but it's not going to kill you today. That's what he said. Okay. And another person just out of the clear blue said, if you ever want to go to Malawi or travel, I will buy a ticket and go with you just to push you in a wheelchair through the airport. I said, what is this? And every single thing got knocked down except I still have to take the COVID shots to travel. And Jesus reminded me of the verse that said, you can even drink poison if you want. And you'll be okay if it's in my will. I know that's true. So I said yes. And as soon as I said yes, I just felt the greatest burden off my shoulders. Now, people who went with me, 3, that was for travel only, not for the 18 days we were in Malawi. They'd been planning for 2 years to go. I had just a couple months to get my passport and get ready to go, so didn't have a lot of time to worry about it, just did it. It's the first thing I ever did on my own. I'd always had my husband to make big decisions with, or my best friend. We've been travel partners in a few things. I've always had somebody. But this one was Karen being called by God. And I said yes. And it was a beautiful thing to be able to say yes on this. When we came back from our trip to Lake Malawi. We had been going up in the car to travel, and Reverend Stanley said, I wanted to go today. It was on a Thursday. He said, I wanted to go today because there's a riot to be planned. There's going to be an uprising in our city today, and it's not safe to be there. So I said, okay. And so we had a wonderful day at the lake, and we came back and we stopped several different places, and each one of those places had a story on the way back. But we got back towards Zomba, and it was getting dark, and I said, do you suppose everything's okay there? And he didn't say anything. And then he said, we have to take a different way. I just got a text from home. There's a truck overturned in the way that we go home usually, and we have to go through the city. And so there we were, headed through the city. And as we neared, we were trapped with traffic behind, just a single lane, but traffic behind and going forward, and you could see the fires. And this was a real riot like you see on TV. And the people were extremely angry. They were upset. The economy is over there, is desperate. These people have no place to turn. There's no place you can sign up for some kind of a welfare program or for any kind of help. These people are starving and they are hard working and there's no return. And while we were there, their currency was devalued by 25%. All the money we took to give them just gone. We came into this riot situation, and we had a lot of people, angry people with rocks in their hands, swarming around our car. Reverend Stanley just kept saying, I hope they don't stone us. Anyone who wants to know, they don't allow guns in their society. No guns, but they do kill people. And mainly, they stone people. There's rocks all over the place. There are big boulders in the road. And we were coming into Zomba, and there's no way we could turn around, and we had to go through. And the traffic came to a complete stop, and the people closed in and began banging on the car. Reverend Stanley actually got out to talk to the people. He said, we don't have any money with us. And so then he got back in. I said, well, it's okay. I just hope they don't stone us. He was very afraid. He was afraid because he had me in the car and his wife. And it was a very dangerous situation. The police had already left. They weren't anywhere to be seen. Earlier in the day, we had stopped at a church, and I hadn't seen another white person since I'd gotten there. And in one of the greetings that we had, this man that I had traveled with came out. And he fulfilled another dream that I had had. I had had a dream of somebody coming and just giving me a big old bear hug like God would do. You know, just that most welcoming hug that you could feel his arms around you. And I thought, I wonder when this will happen, or if it's just silliness on my part. But that didn't happen when I came to the airport, and it didn't happen any other time until this Thursday. And that man, who's 6'4", 6'5", and big, he came out of that church, total surprise to me. And he came down and he gave me a hug. And I just wept because this was my dream. A reassurance that God is there. And so when we were going through this experience in the riot, God was telling me, I'm here with you. You are safe. And I never had one moment of terror or upset. I just sat there with great peace. Now the most wonderful thing of it was that as we sat there and we couldn't move the car and people were banging on the car and there were rocks going all over and fires all over and very angry and upset people, all of a sudden this one man came out of the crowd and he came to the front of the car and he banged on the car and he said, "Do not touch this car." And then he opened up a way. People just started going like this. And he just kept doing that. Do not touch this car. And he walked in front of us until we found a place we could turn off that road to go home. Do not touch this car. He was speaking in his own language. I didn't know what he was saying. But I asked Reverend Stanley. I said, what was he saying? He was saying, do not touch this car. I said, why was he saying that? Did you say something to him? Does he know you? No, I've never seen that man before in my life. Jesus sent this man to deliver us to safety. Do not touch this car. And we went right through the thick of that riot. And people just opened up for us. It is the most amazing thing. When God calls you to go someplace, He is there. Now, this is my time in the prisons. I've never been in a prison before, and I knew I was going to be in prisons for most of my time there. So I had no expectations. I thought, I wonder what it's going to be like. I wonder what my reaction will be. It was when people ask me, what did I enjoy most about my trip? It was going to the prisons, speaking with these men, because Reverend Stanley is the only person that brings them hope in Jesus Christ. Yes, he does bring gifts sometimes, food or whatever, but he brings hope. And you can see the hope in their faces, and I was allowed to speak to groups of 400 sometimes and just share with them. This is life in the prison. This is what they eat. Lucky if they get one spoonful of that a day, cooked outside or in their big kitchens. We already saw that. This is their sleeping. You think we're crowded? This is overcrowding. They sleep so tight because we have 2,770 people in Zomba prison, a facility meant for 800. They sleep like that, and a man stands guard through the night, and every so often says, turn, so they can all turn. All have to turn at the same time. These are their facilities. A sleeping mat there, mosquito net for the children. There are children in their prisons. Reverend Stanley is preaching there, a place where they are just getting ready for a service, and more of their places where they can stay. I came to prison and you came to visit me. They're the children. The women have to bring their children with them. I was so privileged to be there in this place. This is the Mossy prison. One of the women had twins, and I got to hold them.
That one? And that one?
That's Reverend Stanley speaking.
Okay, that's the mother. You see Andomas prison. Oh, what beautiful, yeah. They are twins, they are here in prison, Andomas prison. Yeah, with their mother. Yes, so currently, I've ordered this food. This is beautiful, curry. So that one is crying. Why is this? Why is she crying? Is it because of you? So I'm just looking at you.
Okay. These are some things that we have helped with in his ministry. The first place is a little shop that was set up for an inmate to be able to make some money for his family. To give $100 to these people, they can set up what they call a restaurant, which for $100 for a restaurant, they call it a restaurant. It's a little cart that they sell rolls from or something like that. Also, there's a little bit of, in one of the prisons, they have some training for carpentry and sewing. And I showed you the tailor shop that came from that.
Showing one another using a leather plate. You can see the leather plate, the small leather plate.
The middle one is a shower house. There is no running water, and they were trained.
Which other countries can happen. So many challenges.
We purchased a wheelchair for this inmate. The clinic there had been destroyed. The buildings are made with mud bricks that they know how to make. Everybody has a brick form. Everybody knows how to make brick, and the dirt, the red mud is every place. So they make these bricks. In fact, churches are made by having people gather together, and then each family is assigned to bring so many bricks, and that's how they build their churches. In Malawi, however, you can't be a church until you have 300 regular people. Up until then, you're only called a prayer house. This clinic had been damaged by storms. The bricks are not hardened. They can't be fired. There's no resources to do that. So they're only sun-dried, and termites get in the straw and stuff is between them for the mortar. And so things come down, and they're not very stable. But we were able to replace the roof on this clinic, and it was a marvelous thing. They were very excited about doing that. I was able to tour that clinic when I got there. There was no water. There were no antibiotics. There's nothing there except TB tests and HIV tests. They don't have resources for anything. Here's a funeral. This is a funeral where 5,000 people came. Now here, when we have somebody die, we want to get rid of the evidence as soon as possible. We make it as pretty as we can in a funeral home, and a lot of people just go visit. They don't want the service. There, people want to gather. They close all the jobs, all the businesses. They gather. This is out in the middle of nowhere. 5,000 people. And it was just amazing for this man. They want to be together in fellowship. That so richly. What can I give? These are the needs. Folks, I was told that what they needed was pencils. They don't have pencils in the schools. They don't have paper in the schools. They don't have anything. I'm telling you, I don't know how those teachers do it with kids. But in the prisons, they get less. Why do they get less? Because of a country that is so poor. Nobody's paying taxes. The government doesn't have any money. They're not giving anything to the prisons. All they're doing is incarcerating these people. And so I brought a suitcase of over 1,500 pencils. And we gave them out. And this was at Zomba prison. You can see in the middle, I'm giving out pencils. One to each prisoner. And they come and they hold out their hand and they bow and they say, "Thank you." And as I was writing this up in my journal, which is over there, it turned out to be 170 pages. I just started to bawl. Folks, these people who hadn't eaten in 2 days and hadn't had water for a day were able to gather, and the rich lady from America, gave them a pencil, and they were grateful. That touches my heart so deeply. There are the children raising some of their pencils. Reverend Stanley also takes food and anything else he can use. These are daily needs. They would each place I visited, they would have somebody tell what they needed, what they wanted. Bibles, top on their list every time. We need Bibles. Soap is amazing. These are the cleanest people I ever saw. They made me take a bath twice a day. They all took baths twice a day. I said, "I don't take a bath twice a day." She says, "Well, do you have red dust like we have red dust?" I said, "No." Soap. They don't have soap. I said, "Why don't you have soap? Why don't we just make a soap factory?" Well, we have a soap factory, but we don't have any of the raw materials. We can't get them. No soap, not even in the clinic. No soap. It's one of their most desired. They ask for soap before they ask for food. No bedding, no medical supplies, no shoes for the children or for these inmates going to the latrines. No shoes. Computers and educational supplies. I did go to a school in Zomba prison that they had started, met the people who have come up through the ranks, inmates who are now teachers and principals. It's amazing, but they don't have any supplies. They have no supplies. They're just teaching from what they know and writing in the dust, like Jesus did. Soccer balls, I took 8 soccer balls deflated in my luggage. It was the one time I saw smiles of people just thinking, this is normalcy. But they actually have some soccer teams, they just need equipment. The food and supplies is such a desperate thing. Such a desperate thing. Larger needs. This line, I'm not going to listen to everything he says. He needs a church roof. That's a church that they had built at a chapel at one of the prisons. And they've got all the walls and they meet there, but there's no roof. And so they're hoping someday to get a roof. Water is another big project, and of course, training in the prisons, they have none. Water is the biggest project as far as I can see. There's no life without water. You know that. I know that. Reverend Stanley, that's how I first got involved with him. Reverend Stanley, on Christmas Day, I think it was 2017, said I was at the Mossy prison and I was visiting, and I thought he was going to tell me a wonderful story. And he said it was so sad. I cried all the way home. Why were you sad? I wrote back. I was sad because the prisoners were crying. They had no food and no water for 4 days. I said, how can that be? I said, in this country, if you have a stray dog and you cage it and you refuse to give it food or water, you're going to be in prison. He said, well, what happens is the facilities have to prepay for their water from what they get for the government. It lasts for a month. We only get so much. $1,500 a month runs the Zomba maximum security prison of 2,770 prisoners. That pays for uniforms. That pays for repairs to housing. That pays for staff. That pays for food. That pays for water. It pays for everything. That's what they get from the government. For that many people. Some of us live on that easily in just a few weeks. We were hit to our hearts. I know I'm going to just a minute. Hit to our hearts with this in our small church. And we decided that Zomba prison, or Demasi prison, needed a water project. What they do, they put a well inside the gates of the prison, and then they have water. For $2,200 or $22,000, we were able to develop a well project over there. And because of that, during COVID, they had cleanliness. They had all the women from all the prisons with all their children come to Demasi because they had water. It was life-saving. It's a 20-year project. It gives and gives and gives. And not only that, when something broke down, I thought, oh boy, here's some more money they need. And he said, no, we're saving so much money by not having to buy the water that we take care of our own now, and we even have room for improvements. So now we're in the middle of a water project for Zomba prison, which is $50,000. And they have struggled for 2.5 weeks just to get enough fuel to fire up the trucks and the drilling equipment. So they're really going on, and he says he hopes, well, something else broke down, a lorry of some sort. Anyway, he hopes this week they will begin drilling. We are making on Tuesday our second $15,000 payment, and in November our final payment will be due. Water. It's the water of life. I asked God during this whole thing, every time I went to a prison, wherever I went, I said, God, who am I? Who am I? Do you remember me? I'm not the person who goes out and fundraises or speaks in front of big groups of people or travels. I've never been out of the country. Travels to weird countries. Who am I? God, you forgot who I am. I asked that the whole 18 days I was gone, and it wasn't until the day I was back on the plane going home, and God finally answered it. I've studied God and Jesus for a long time. I've wanted to follow Him for a long time. So that wasn't it. You know as much about God as you can know. Well, God, you don't remember who I am. I'm missing my husband. I'm missing my best friend. A lot of my family's not behind this. And I don't know what to do with all this suffering. He had an answer. And it was so clear. He said, I know who you are. Do you know who you are? Do you know who you are? And my answer to God was, I'm learning. I'm learning what you have for me. I'm 73 years old now, and I'm learning. There's so much more. Do you know who you are in this? You know, in Luke 14, it's the story of the great banquet, where God's calling the lame and the crippled and the blind and the poor. He's calling everybody to come into the great banquet. And before that, I mean, it's all one discourse. You have to read all of 14. Luke, do it. First is about who do you honor, you know, with seating. He starts like a party and he starts getting where they are because they're in the middle of a big party. He says, well, you don't show special honor to people. And he heals a poor man. And then he keeps on talking. And then he gets into the great final banquet. And he shows who's being invited. But the thing that really struck me recently is that we get stuck on the word banquet. And we still are thinking about big parties and how do we seat people. But you know what that's talking about? That's talking about life. Life and giving. The whole thing. And we in our culture are so ingrained to try to be better and do better and to save and use our funds wisely and to have a good nest egg to pass down to the next generation. And what we're doing when we do that is we are inviting more of the same. We're inviting more rich people, more people we know. And he's saying, no. Not that you don't give to your children and see to their well-being. We have a lot of people in our church who are just building houses for their kids. No. People are supposed to stand on their own, and work is meant to bring us closer to God. And I really believe that God wants us to see the whole picture. People aren't just suffering in Malawi, but that's the people I know. That's the people who are my friends now. Most of the people in prison are not in prison because they are some kind of horrible people. Most of the people in prison are there because they've suffered and they've stolen a bag of corn to feed their families. There's no food over there. There are no resources. There's no drug problem. They don't have enough money to support a drug problem. There's no guns. They don't have any guns. They're just at their wits' ends. There's nothing. And these people who are being caged, you see the commercials on TV where people can walk for miles to get their water, and we feel, oh, that's terrible. You know, if these men could walk for their water, they would. But they're caged. When we went through the bush, we saw that just about every community had its own little water like that right there. And somebody has put it up. The Amish have put one up in this community, and well, the Muslims have a big influence there. And different, you know, the Scottish church and that kind of thing. But the prisons are the bottom of the barrel. They don't get anything the government has left. And there are good people there, and there's a vibrant church there. And the people stand up in front and share the memorized scripture because they don't have Bibles to read. They share with one another. This is John 2, verse 1. And they'll go through and say every verse as they go through. It's amazing. And they sing. And I'm going to stop with this one. They sing. They sing. And I asked Reverend Stanley, I said, how do these choirs get such wonderful songs, and they're all singing parts, and they've got such wonderful dances and choreography, and it was just amazing to me. When do they practice? You know, that kind of thing. Because I didn't do choir practices. They don't have money for sheet music. I said, where does this come from? He just sits on the couch and he says, it's in us. It's just in us. I said, Reverend Stanley, that's the most racist thing I've ever heard anybody say. It's just in us. Yes, it is. No, it's the Spirit of God in them. And they just sing. They sing their hearts out. And somebody starts it, and then they just keep on going until they have an amazing harmony, and just like that one you saw where I was dancing. That just came up with somebody having had an experience and joyfully singing to the Lord. It's just in us. He said, you all don't have it yet. He's right. Oh, I love beautiful music. I was thrilled with this morning, but this is something else. It was otherworldly. Reverend Stanley's home church, they start at 6 in the morning, but the men's choir comes at 5:30. They have 3 services. The first one's in English, the second one's in their home language, and the third one is for kids. It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, they don't have food for life. But they have the bread of life. And he said, you know, we're very poor, but we're very rich. And he said, you guys, you're very rich, but you're very poor in heart. You've missed this. We've missed what's real. And the way that we got on board was begin to suffer with these people, to keep up with them, to make friends with them, to want to give, to want to do. There's so many ways to touch a Christian's life who's just barely hanging on. What a wonderful thing. An elder in our church said, this has brought our church alive. Amen. Thank you so much.
One of the things that she has talked about a lot is that just the communication between countries, between Reverend Stanley and people over here, just even showing that they care is one of the most important things to him. And they communicate through an app called WhatsApp internationally. If anyone is interested in having Reverend Stanley's number, he loves to chat us up all the time. I have it. He likes to give his reports. It's a way that we can feel like we are one global community. So if you're interested, just email me or ask me and I can get you his WhatsApp information. If you'd like to contribute at all to this, she is sending the well money this Tuesday, but there's another payment in November. Or if there are other projects that you're interested in, just contact me.
Touched on a lot of